Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. There has been considerable uproar in our nation these past couple weeks. Many citizens and politicians are outraged at what they view as an unbelievable abuse of power on behalf of the Internal Revenue Service. YPN's Larry McGee is standing by with our first story today. Larry, how did all this corruption begin?
Well, leading up to the last election, tens of new political groups began applying for tax-exempt status from the IRS, asserting that they were in fact social welfare groups. The IRS was then faced with the challenge of ascertaining whether or not each group was directing the majority of its efforts towards social welfare or towards politics. The Internal Revenue Service has admitted to targeting conservatives, but by contrast, what was their behavior towards liberals? When Jeff Cohen's group, the leftists, Action for a Progressive Future, applied for tax exemption, the process was too long and slow, he said, but there was less hassle for him than there were for the Tea Party groups. Cohen was asked 9 questions concerning his group, most of them about the politics of his group's website, but he was approved after 18 months. On the other hand, conservative groups faced scores of questions, and many are still awaiting approval after 2 years. Cohen conveys that he advocates strong probes by the IRS for small groups seeking tax exemption, but he doesn't believe that certain groups should receive special scrutiny simply because they are either right or left. According to the Treasury Inspector General's report, the IRS's inquisition of the Tea Party began in 2010 in the tax exemption unit based in Cincinnati. Specialists there, who are charged with the task of denying tax-exempt status to groups whose mission is primarily political, began screening applications using 3 search terms: Tea Party, 912, and Patriots. According to the report, the word Tea Party actually became the shorthand catchphrase for all potential political cases. Cohen says the targeting of anyone's politics is appalling, but while the inspector's report acknowledges that the search terms were inappropriate, it concludes that the Cincinnati office was not politically biased. Of the 298 organizations that were reviewed, only a third were triggered by conservative search terms. 2/3 were not, but in the end, all Tea Parties were somehow reviewed. In the final analysis, what some see as missing from the Inspector General's report is why the inquisition lacked political balance. While the investigators' report admits that the search terms were inappropriate, what they don't report is why the most important terms all targeted organizations with conservative values. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
We appreciate your report, Larry. Now, in other news, the Justice Department this week collected phone logs for 20 telephone lines used by more than 100 reporters and editors in an investigation aimed at finding who, inside the government, leaked classified information to reporters at the Associated Press. Prosecutors also subpoenaed and seized cell phone records of several AP journalists.
The Associated Press is calling this a broad overreach by the U.S. government, but Attorney General Eric Holder defended the Justice Department's decision to seize AP phone records of calls made over a 2-month period between April and May of 2012. At that time, the wire service was reporting a series of stories about an al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen.
Now, one report in question detailed a disrupted terror plot to attack a U.S. airliner using an upgraded underwear bomb. Government officials complained that the spoiled al-Qaeda plot revealed classified information and compromised counterterrorism operations. Attorney General Eric Holder stated, "It put the American people at risk, and that is not a hyperbole or intentional exaggeration. It put the American people at risk, and trying to determine who's responsible for that, I think, required very aggressive action."
I'm sure the AP protested that action with the letter to Attorney General, and they calling the seizure of phone records a massive and unprecedented intrusion by the Department of Justice into the news-gathering activities of the Associated Press. So far, federal prosecutors have reviewed tens of thousands of documents and have also conducted more than 550 interviews. Even Attorney General Eric Holder himself was interviewed and therefore excused himself from leading the leak investigation.
Now, leaked information is not the only character flaw that the U.S. government administration is facing. Sexual misconduct in the military continues to be a major unresolved problem for today's men and women in the armed forces. This week, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel ordered everyone who is assigned to prevent sexual abuse to be retrained. This comes after another officer, an Army sergeant at Fort Hood, Texas, is accused of sexual assault.
Wow. The criminal investigation is centered on a sergeant who was the sexual assault and prevention response coordinator at Fort Hood. The sergeant allegedly had a relationship with a subordinate female soldier that involved prostitution. He allegedly approached two other female soldiers to do the same, but they refused, and one of the women said he assaulted her.
Now, Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Przynski was arrested last week for allegedly groping a woman in a parking lot. He was in charge of the Air Force's Sexual Assault Prevention Unit. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said, "Sexual assault is a despicable crime and one of the most serious challenges facing this department. It's a threat to the safety and the welfare of our people and health, reputation, and trust of this institution."
The sexual assaults in the military are double that of the general population, with 6% of servicewomen reporting unwanted sexual conduct in the past year compared to just 3% of civilians. Kimberly Olson, a retired Air Force colonel, said in an interview with CBS News, "If I could use a battlefield analogy, it seems like the enemy is inside the wire."
Olson is the president of Grace After Fire. This group provides support for women veterans after serving, including those who have been sexually assaulted. Now, Olson says until the military holds offenders accountable, things will not change. A Pentagon survey found that last year, 26,000 servicewomen were sexually assaulted, but never reported it.
Wow. Now, authorities in Northern California are experiencing bittersweetness as the case of an 8-year-old girl and the search for her killer is quickly starting to unravel. After initiating a 2-week manhunt for a suspect on the run that didn't exist, they found out that the actual suspect was much closer than they thought.
The 12-year-old brother of 8-year-old Layla Fowler has been arrested in the murder of his sister. It all started after he called police saying that he found his sister's body stabbed to death after a man broke into his house. He also told police that he had to hide inside from the intruder. Now, residents are stunned at these tragic turn of events.
At a vigil for Layla, her mother, clearly emotional, thanked the audience for their attendance and support. Now, police aren't saying what led them to suspect the 12-year-old, but the charges have left the family with the loss of 2 children and a community still in shock.
Now, St. Francis Assisi is depicted in photographs releasing a dove. Now, recently, while making his rounds in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis of Rome was handed 2 doves, which he released into the air. Of course, no peace has yet come as a result of these birds being released.
And last but not least, we brought you a report on the Israeli bombing in Syria. Let's take a closer look as it appears that the Israelis were not using only mortar rounds, but it looks like they're also using tactical nuclear weapons. Take a look at this.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
انفجار ضخم جدا في جبل القاسم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. دمشق 5 اليوم.
Amazing. Well, from unjust governmental offices, people chasing after their lusts, to violent children, this world and everything in it is crumbling in on itself. And folks, no amount of doves can save you from the impending doom that mankind has and will bring on himself and this world. But there is a way to come out from among them. Yisrael Hawkins and the House of Yahweh, they have an open door to all those who want true peace.
Now, if you would like to contact the House of Yahweh and request your free prophetic word or monthly newsletter, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. Or you can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can email them at info@yahweh.com. Or you can visit them on their website at www.yahweh.com or www.yisraelhawkins.com. And for any calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen.
Now, make sure you got your pencils, papers, and your holy scriptures. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for joining us.